As certified life coaches with 45 years combined experience in human resources, Jen Trum and Katherine have both experienced the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, both personally and professionally. What they both know to be true is this: our mental, physical, and emotional health are the essential building blocks in order to thrive and shine in the field of HR. In a first of its kind podcast, we'll be getting real and we'll discuss and share what has contributed to both our success and struggles, with the goal of inspiring women around the globe to stand tall and take the necessary action to both thrive and shine in HR. Here are your hosts, Jen and Katherine. All right, episode 23, Jen. We were on 23. We're going to stop the flow. So I want to welcome everyone to Thrive and Shine HR. This is our baby. Jen and I just love seeing and experiencing this podcast with everybody, always hearing from our listeners, and just really making sure we're connecting in this way within the HR space. So we're so happy you've joined us, Jen. I am dying to know just a little bit more about your July 4th backpacking adventure. Sum it up.
Yeah, so July 4th being midweek, we waited until the weekend. So July 4th itself, we kind of couched it and didn't do a whole lot because it was so hot here where we were in Oregon. But the last weekend, we did. My husband and I, for the second time in 20 years, went backpacking up by Crater Lake in Oregon, and it was absolutely spectacular. It was so pretty. So we were able to find a spot at a lake and had the entire lake to ourselves.
Oh my gosh.
That's one of the things about backpacking, right? It's like getting actually out there is the hard part. But once you're out there, it is such a different experience than just regular hiking, because you have an opportunity to go where nobody else is in a way that's just, there's something about it that is just so freeing and so beautiful. And so, yeah, we had the lake, we had a little campsite next to a little stream. It was just beautiful.
Heaven.
Yeah, totally heaven. How about you? How was your July 4th?
Amazing. Same. I mean, I'm in the middle of the Rocky Mountains here in Colorado, and I guess I can't say same because we didn't backpack, but we, on the 4th, we had some sort of loose plans, and we live quite literally at the base of a trail that goes into wilderness. We are surrounded by wilderness at my home in Marble, Colorado, and we have friends call us up and say, hey, we want to go hiking. We went to the top of the pass and back down, and we had a big barbecue, so much fun. And I just hiked 4 days in a row. And as a consultant, I have never taken 4 days off in a row. I mean, you just, unless I'm on a full on vacation, I don't recognize holidays anymore. I'm just always working. But my flow is a little bit different now that I'm a consultant. I love the flow. It's very, very different in my life right now. So I don't actually want to stop the flow that I've got going on. But to take those 4 days off and just truly refresh my brain was amazing. It was truly, truly, truly amazing. So I feel like we had very similar experiences. I didn't have the opportunity to truly get back there and wake up with the sunrise and all those things that come with backpacking. I love them. But nature for me is my healing source for sure. Can't get enough of it. Yeah.
Well, so it's so interesting just because you can get so many different things this time of year. But I think for the most part, it's just such a wonderland, in so many places. Where you are and where I am, it's such an open, beautiful, amazing space. So that we live in.
100%. Yeah. So here we are. I wouldn't say back in the grind necessarily, but we are post July 4th. And today we're going to talk about stopping the flow, how to like actually successfully deal with that never ending flow of HR work. And I love this topic. I feel as though one thing is for sure certain. This is what my mother told me from the day I entered the workforce. She's like, your inbox will never not be full. Nice double negative. It's always going to be full. And there's never a dull moment in HR. And I don't know a single HR practitioner who said, you know, I go through these really prolonged periods of time where I'm just bored. I mean, it's just the exact opposite in HR. I feel like work just kind of keeps coming, and it really can be anything over here on the far end of the pendulum that just stresses you out and is the bane of your existence. And it can be over here the love of your life and anywhere in between.
Mm-hmm.
I want to start off by just getting super clear for our listeners when we talk about the never-ending flow of HR work. I'm curious, because I think it may look different for every single one of our listeners, but Jen, I'm curious what it looks like for you. What does that never-ending flow of HR work look like in your life?
Well, I thought about this one because, you know, you're right. It can look so different for so many people. But for me, what I really thought of is when I sat with this, it's like over the time that I've been in human resources, there are different like beliefs that become formed, right? That become kind of grounded into the kind of the way that we function based on what we've been taught, what we've learned, programming, all of that. And one of the beliefs that I was able to tease out as I was thinking about this question is really the belief that it all is important. You know, that it all is important, equally important, it all matters. And I think, you know, as HR professionals, one of the things that becomes really challenging is to be able to separate and break apart, you know, prioritization on what really does matter in the scope of like how we're showing up, and then really being able to kind of have that clarity to kind of separate that out. But it really comes down for me on some of these beliefs that are so built in that you don't know what you don't know in terms of questioning, in terms of being curious, any of that. And so this episode, I think, is going to be really great for so many who may not even realize they're kind of stuck in it, and be able to start kind of pulling out and seeing it from a more clear, you know, perspective. So yeah, I think for me, it's kind of the beliefs that are kind of intertwined within, you know, our conscious business, and how do you kind of tease that out? So that's what came up for me, Catherine. How about you? For you, how does it show up for you? What does it look like?
I kid you not, as I was preparing for this episode, the word belief kept coming up in my brain. I kid you not. So the fact that you led with that, I'm like, well, of course. And as usual, you and I are just so aligned and so, you know, kind of trending toward the same point. I think the only thing I have to add to that, what you just sparked in me, was nobody's done anything wrong. I really want our listeners to hear this. We haven't done anything wrong with the beliefs that we have chosen up to this point. And whatever belief you choose to move forward with, even after this episode and into the future, there's no right or wrong. I do think it's important to point out that socialization, especially of women, has us believing that we are constantly behind, specifically in the workplace. We have to work that much harder. We have to prove ourselves. Women also have a tendency to seek external validation. We want to hear that we're doing a great job. So we're going to deliver more. And knowing and doing the research on all of that socialization that informs our beliefs, both our internal beliefs that come from within, but also external factors, all of it is, we get to make a choice every single day if we're going to continue with those beliefs, or just look at them and say, oh, well, that's interesting. I was socialized as a woman. I see where that's coming from, and I don't want to continue with that anymore. don't want to continue to be stressed out in how I'm interpreting the flow of work. I don't know. So you really got me going already today.
I mean, that I love that so much in terms of the socialization and like how that's so natural, but to be able to kind of pause and start, questioning that and saying, is this necessary? Or is this really kind of, what really has been kind of that socialized programming, right? Like, so
Yeah.
yes, that resonates so heavily with me.
I love it. I mean, when you look back on your career, can you identify one of the lowest of your low points when it comes to that barrage of never-ending work in HR? Do you have like one clear-cut example, or is it a multitude of things? What comes to mind when you think about your absolute lowest of lows when it comes to that never-ending flow?
So I'm going to go way back.
Oh, let's do it.
I'm going to go way back, and I'm going to talk about a time, the first time and not the last time, where HR was pulled into HR. Because I was at a point where I was so in my head, right? So overloaded, so, busy beyond belief that any disruptions, I was, very early in my career, but any disruptions that were not planned, expected, or whatever came with like a deep sigh, right? Would come with like a kind of thing. And it was to a point where I just really like did not have full awareness around how I was then offloading my stress and overwhelm and different things onto other people, because I didn't have really the necessary skills to be able to understand how I can better control my flow, so to speak. And so instead, what I was using is like my emotional reactions to kind of try to navigate, or I remember there was a supervisor at the time who would, as they would come by, it was kind of like in my deep mind, I'm trying to like think back, I was like, what was that about, right? And it was really about like this deep kind of intention of wanting to be left alone, and thinking that if I behaved in certain ways, that perhaps they just let me do my work, and then I could get through the day, and then I would be over it. And it just doesn't work that way if you're not communicating, if you're not open. I mean, it makes me think of like Brene Brown's book Daring Greatly, right? Mm-hmm. Where she talks about like the courage to be able to just speak your truth. Yeah. And just speak honestly about where you're at. And not only just that speaking your truth externally, but for me, it was about speaking my truth internally. And instead I was acting out externally, when really what I needed to do is clean house internally. So for me, that was I'm damn straight. And that's, I think, where, where it comes to, navigating this like overload of like the flow that we got. And when you don't have kind of that maturity or that awareness, it can come out in all kinds of ways. And so for me, it was just a very dysfunctional way of being able to try to say it's too much and I don't know what to do about it. And I think that so many of us kind of fall into that. And it's great now to be able to look back on that, and reflect back on that. But that definitely, and these years later, I can look back and see, oh, that's what I was trying to say. Not very effectively, but that's what I was trying to say. So that's what comes up for me. Lady, what comes up for you when it comes
to... Are we separated at birth? Yes. All day long. Like that... I tend to just, I like to be busy. There's something deep inside of me. I mean, going back to when my father was a physician, and I just remember like filing, like he would hire me to file old school, like paper files for his private practice in cardiology. And I just remember his office staff, like having conversations, like just like normal human conversations, taking a break. And I remember telling on them to my dad, because I was like, Dad, they weren't working. I was working the whole time. And I have always been this go, 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 go. And I don't build in time for other people, for interruptions, for a Slack message to come through. And that is just how I've always been wired. And I thought, well, that's my DNA. That is who I am. And it's not true.
Yeah.
It took me until my mid 40s to realize, going back to your beliefs, that that's just a belief. That is not how you are wired. Like, whoa, 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 whoa. So similarly, it's so funny you bring that one up. This one happened for me. I'm trying to do the math. I was probably early 30s or mid 30s. I worked in an open floor plan. HR did have the only like office, but there were about 50 people in this open space.
Wow.
And this is really terrible to say. This is so not PC, but we joked that I had Tourette's. It's not funny. Okay. Tourette's is not funny. But when I would get an email, I would have like, sometimes I would like say the F word, thinking I was saying it under my breath. My HR counterpart, who I shared an office with, my assistant, I hate that word, but my assistant, like, I mean, just an email would set me off. And so I don't remember exactly what happened, but something happened at work where a coworker who I'd known for 10 years, who was way across the office floor, emailed me and said, "You are being disruptive. Can you please be quiet?"
Whoa.
True. And that to this day, I still have some shame I need to tease out. There's still a lot of shame. As the HR person, I was being disruptive to everybody else because the work kept coming in. And instead of being able to have the emotional intelligence and then the thought intelligence to like calm myself down, I was so like out of control and just in reaction thinking, well, like, doesn't everybody else get this pissed off when whatever happens just keeps coming in? And no, Kath, not everyone is like that. And you don't have to be like that either.
Right. And that's the biggest piece, like you said. I mean, I think 99% of people do believe it's within our DNA to be able to, or not be able to, but to, when we have those types of reactions, that that's who I am. That's how my dad is. That's how my mom is. Right. And so being able to kind of say, well, actually, we get to choose at any time. And if that's not serving you, if that's no longer working for you, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. Like, do you want to continue to react in this way to the never ending? Like, is that really how you want to react? Is this how you want to like live out the rest of your work years? Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. So when did you finally learn to deal with it? Or have you? I mean, maybe that's the first question.
I think it's always, I don't know. I don't think I've met anybody who ever says, I got it. I got it. No problem. Because life doesn't work that way, right? It always comes in ebbs and flows. It's always going to come in ways that are going to kind of shake us and rock us off our tracks. And so that's the key, is like to be able to kind of navigate the flow and the movement of everything, and having that agility to move with it. And it's not perfect. This particular week, I'm going to be totally vulnerable. This has been a tougher week for me, just in terms of navigating some of the things that were unexpected. And I think that's kind of where that flow piece for so many can be so overwhelming, because for those of us who do like to keep busy and like that, that kind of status quo most of the time, when then it gets out of alignment, that's where I think for many of us, it starts to get very overwhelming because now you're kind of not in that flow, quote unquote flow. Yeah. So I mean, I think that this is just a constant thing that, like you were talking about, the thought work and being able to kind of do that checking in with ourselves about, okay, what's going on here? What's happening here? Because like for me, it's not always something you can tune into right away. You've got to, flow through the rest of the day. Like yesterday was a bear, and it really wasn't until I got home late in the evening and could feel my whole body still vibrating. Yeah. Right? Like I'm kind of laying there, I'm like, oh my gosh, I am under some stuff here. And so I spent some time and I checked in with it. And so I think that is like such a massive shift for me, and has really been kind of how I've kind of shifted the way that I approach, things like this within the last couple of years, but it is definitely a work in progress as I say to you today.
Yes. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, well, because I haven't. It's a complete work in progress. I could not agree with you more.
Yeah. Well, how about, is there anything that you have felt that's really helped you kind of get it? Has there been anything for you where you're like, you know what? I see it now. What has kind of been something that's helped you kind of get over the hump of at least having that better awareness around it, and then your ability to have more empowerment around it?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I know I say this, I feel like I'm on repeat when we get together on this podcast, but it really wasn't until I understood neuroplasticity, until I understood the human brain, that we can develop new neural pathways. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. That's full on science. Okay, well, how do you do that? And the way you develop new neural pathways is you've got to stop focusing on the same thing you've been focused on. Oh, well, the email just, it pings, and it drives me crazy. And you just start going into that spiral where here's this person again. Your brain looks for evidence to reinforce your beliefs. And once I really understood that concept, your energy goes where your focus flows, or your focus flows where your energy goes. You use those interchangeably, right?
Yeah.
And once I understood that concept, I was like, okay, so it's not a matter of necessarily turning off and stopping the workflow. This sounds so counterintuitive, especially if you're stuck in fight or flight, or just this constant state of stress and cortisol in your body. Just trigger warning, I guess, for anyone who has resistance to what I'm about to say. It probably just means you've been in this state for so long, you can't even see that it's your beliefs, right? So just bear with me on this. The way to turn it off is to actually turn it on. And here's what I mean by that. You find time for the things that you want more of. You identify what you love in work and outside of work, and you make the time for those things. And I'm not saying ditch out on your number one priority. That's, you have auditors coming in next week, and you're going to be like, I kind of want to go on a backpack next week, so I'm going to ditch it. That's not what I'm saying. It's finding the and, right? But absolutely making sure you identify what turns you on in this life, and then maybe not in the sexual sense, maybe, I don't know, but just finding the time and really shifting your focus to the things that you love. And when you love and you make time for those things, the bad things don't seem as bad anymore because your focus isn't there. You're developing these new neural pathways, and your focus is no longer in this swirl going down and circling the drain. You're actually spiraling up in this really beautiful way. And it's just one of the coolest. I didn't understand that my thoughts were leading to, it was how I was reacting to the work. It wasn't the work itself. And now I have this whole new perspective. It's seriously like I had a brain transplant. All it took was thought work. I did not have a brain transplant, although some people would argue I have, because they were like, you are not the same person you were 3 years ago. I'm like, I know I'm not. I'm happy. It's weird, right?
Wow.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
No, I agree completely. I think I love, what you're saying about the neural pathways and how it just really requires intention, practice, and patience. And for those who really want to make these changes in their life, I think one of the biggest ones for me is that patience piece, right? Because knowing that there is, this shift that we're wanting to make, there's always going to be that messy middle on, kind of the 2 steps forward, a step back. It just requires kind of that diligence. And I think that's where so many, and I know myself even, right? It can be kind of frustrating to want to kind of continue in the effort sometimes when you're not seeing the fruits of the labor. And it's so imperative to like kind of make that commitment and set that intention, really understanding your why. And so like everything you're saying is like exactly, I think, what truly can help kind of propel to that next level. And it's really then just kind of taking those steps and being consistent about it. So yeah, I'm like, everything you said, yes, and.
Yes,
and
and.
really,
Yeah.
don't give up, just keep moving forward, because that's where it can feel so awkward and uncomfortable, right? You've got 40 plus years or 30 years or however long you've been on this earth and however long you've been in HR, there's a lot of stuff to unpack. There's a lot of stuff to kind of move through. And so having kind of that patience around that is just critically key in really being able to make the changes that I think you and I have been able to make, and so many I think are working towards.
I couldn't agree more. And that's such a good point that I feel compelled to reiterate it. It's, to use myself as an example, it was 45 years of belief that I can't control this work. This job is so hard. People don't understand what it's like to be. I mean, just these constant thoughts.
Yeah.
And I truly, truly, truly believed him. And it was 45 years of that type of thinking and that buildup. And once I got it really quickly. I understood it. I was like, got it. Neural pathways, got it. But the practice and the patience, what you just said, is everything. Without practice, nothing's going to change. I mean, going back to like soccer practice when you're in the 2nd grade, you're not going to learn how to dribble and make a goal unless you practice. But the beauty of it is that even if you fall off practicing consistently, you've already built up the habit, you've built up the muscle, and it's going to come back quicker and quicker and quicker. So, I mean, consistency is key. However, if you fall off, you just get right back up and it comes back so much quicker. So I just really appreciate you saying that. Just this isn't I don't think there's a quick fix. It's an actual fix, and it takes commitment and it takes practice.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, I mean, we can get something like that, right? I mean, just the awareness piece is like, it's beautiful and exciting, and also it can be devastating at the same time, right? Because now you can never not
you can't not know it.
Yeah, you can't not know it, but then it's when you're not quite there yet, and know that, it's just having some grace around the fact that this is something that takes time, and you got it. You've got it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, knowing that, I mean, you've already started going down the road of giving our listeners some advice, but is there anything else you want to add on in terms of, for our listener out there who would do just about anything to sort of stop the never-ending flow of work? What would your advice be for them?
Take a pause. I think the biggest advice that I would have, which is always the hardest thing to do when people are in the state, we've talked about this in previous episodes, is really taking a pause. Because the biggest question that I think anybody can ask themselves when they're in a state of overwhelm or confusion or whatever is like, what am I making this mean about myself?
Yes.
Right? What am I making this mean about me? Do I feel as though I might be less worthy, or I would feel less worthy or less than if I do not engage in X, Y, Z, right? What does it actually mean? And I think so often we don't take the time to ask these questions because we just, in the back of our minds, have these beliefs around, well, I just have to. And so we're doing it without really this conscious awareness. And so I think, going back to what you said earlier, just that awareness alone is so massive, and starting to kind of ask yourself the questions, because if you know that you find yourself in these repetitive patterns, that you're, overloaded, and you just can't feel like you could find the air to get yourself to a place where you can get clear, that I think more than ever, it's like so important to kind of carve that out, like you were saying earlier. And this is like not one of those things that people are either comfortable with or accustomed to carving out within, our lives. But yet one where, for me, and I know for you and anyone else who kind of does the work that we do, this is the consistent messaging I'm sending, right? That consistent messaging of, I know it's not comfortable. I know it's not, I know it's not normal. It's not something that we're used to. However, recognize that by giving yourself this, this gift of awareness, you now are setting the stage for what's possible. And I think that alone is such a huge thing that so often is missed. What about you? What comes up for you on advice?
You just made me think of something I never thought of before, because the power of the pause, that's something one of my clients says regularly, the power of the pause. And you just brought up the pause, and you brought up the pause before, and I love the pause. What I just made a connection to is power through. So instead, when you think you need to power through, so I'm speaking quite directly to our listeners right now. When you think I need to power through, think, what if I power paused, right? What if I did the exact, right? You made me think of it, girl. I'm not telling you. Like, power pause. Like, don't power through. When you want to power through, that is the exact moment to say, power pause.
I am writing this down.
Right? Well, I wrote it down too, because I was like, hold on. Jen just inspired me big time, per usual. And when we power pause, and I'm going to say the exact same thing you shared slightly differently, I think. I sit, right? The power, I'm like, all right, let's get fact-based. Let's separate the fact out from your mind drama, Katherine Lane Fry. Is anyone saying to you, do more work, keep up, you're not doing enough, you're not producing? Why aren't you able to answer the email, put that PowerPoint together, and convince this person not to leave all at the same time? What's wrong with, like, the expectations we put on ourselves? 99 times out of 100, it's our own inner game. It's our own beliefs that we started out this episode talking about. And when you get real with yourself and say, okay, nobody, my boss is not saying that to me. Why am I saying it to myself? And then you realize, in a very loving way, oh, it's my thoughts that are the problem, and my thoughts can be the solution. So, yeah, I don't know where all of that came from, but I do think my last boss, performance review, year after year after year. I think a lot of our listeners, and Jen, I know you can probably relate to this too. A lot of our listeners can probably relate to this one. You sit in your performance review and your boss says, stop trying to do so much. I need you to take care of yourself. And the thought I used to choose, which I truly, truly believed, was, you don't understand HR. I have to keep going. And I would placate my boss and say, yeah, you're totally right. And then I would walk out of the office and say, he has no idea how much I need to do and what goes on behind the scenes. And he just has no idea because he's never been in HR. That was a total falsity, bullshit belief that kept myself in the spin cycle of just stress ball. That I was like, oh, no one can really see how stressed I. Oh, yes, they could.
Yeah.
Of course they could. And it negatively impacted people. And still working through a little bit of shame on that, right? It's like, oh, you've got to forgive yourself, Kath, because you did the best you could at the time. Truly. So I don't know. It's, I went all over the place with that one, but I think a lot of listeners can relate to that. Oh, you just don't understand. I have to keep going.
Yeah,
Well,
totally.
bullshit on yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you had said earlier something that I kind of will bring into this as well is really kind of this underlying belief that we must look, even if we're not, there's like this underlying belief that we must, it almost like there's a sense that, if we're not completely overloaded or just ridiculously busy, we're missing something. There's something
Totally.
not right. And so like some of these beliefs are so important, like you said, to be able to start kind of teasing out and questioning, where does this come from?
Yeah.
Right. And even if, like you had said something about the boss who was like, hey, please take care of yourself. Many of us, and myself included, don't necessarily get that reaction from a boss. And I think occasionally you can.
Oh,
Occasionally, the situation that so many others are in are the bosses that are completely clueless and completely like unrecognizing of the work that we do, and yet has this desire to keep loading on as much as they possibly can. And so that's where the situation comes into play of like that communication and that like openness around making sure that we are actually communicating
yeah.
when that gets to places where it becomes uncomfortable. Whereas for many of us, that's such a difficult thing to do. We want to be able to say yes, we want to be able to do it all, we want like there's all of these things, and these then get back to kind of these underlying beliefs that we should be asking why.
Yeah.
Why does it really matter? What is it really saying about you, or what do you believe that it's saying about you? So it's like all of these different ways that it could come about. Like you said, it all roads lead back to our own thoughts, our own beliefs, and ultimately how we can regain control of that kind of mental plane. And ultimately, if it means that we recognize from that perspective that we're in a situation that's toxic or whatever, not serving us, then we can kind of make that from a more clear perspective or make a decision on whether to stay or go. But at least then we're clear about what we own, right? Whereas so
Oh,
often that's where it really becomes difficult, and we're not able to see the forest from the trees because we're not recognizing the beliefs that we are actually carrying that are making it that much more difficult for ourselves. Right. And so I think bringing that all together and just kind of coming back to kind of what does this really mean to me and how am I making it mean is it's just a powerful trick and tool that people can take advantage of.
yeah. I remember, gosh, I mean, flashing back, some of my clients really respond to, well, what are you making that mean? What is your narrative? What are you making that mean? And I had a client who was just so stuck, and I didn't see it. I mean, we all make missteps, right? And I had a client who said, please don't ask me one more time what I'm making it mean. And I was like, fair, totally fair. I'll come up with some new language. But it is a very, very powerful question to ask ourselves. Well, what am I making this mean? Right? I don't know. I think there's so much power in that.
Yeah.
I love what you just brought up something a little like when your boss is contributing to that flow. You brought up something very different. And I want to capitalize on that point. So when you feel like your boss is contributing to that never-ending workflow, my mother, and I'm not married. My partner and I have been together for 9 years, and his mom's name is Linda. And I call this the Linda. This is something she taught to me. She's like, I had a boss who just kept coming in and adding more to my plate and would stop by and say, hey, do this, add this to your plate. She was in finance, right? So let's figure out let's get a new payroll system, right? And what she would do, quite literally, she'd pull out her to-do list and say, okay, love the idea. I have the auditors coming next week. I'm pretty sure that's a priority. I can't reschedule that. The auditors come when they can. So I've got that on my list. And she would quite literally go through her priorities. It kept her very organized, focused on her top priorities. But she used it as a tool to educate her boss who in her case, like, did control the flow of her work.
Mm-hmm.
And every single time she either got the information, no, Linda, you do need to bump that to the top, or you need to put that in number 3, or whatever it was. Or her boss would say, yep, I just love firing off ideas. I love sharing them with you. Let's table that for 2 years from now. So you brought up something very powerful. It's like using and developing our skill of assertion and using our voice and standing tall,
Mm-hmm.
and realizing that too, that's a skill. And I think it's a skill a lot of us don't even realize we're lacking in. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, it is, because I think, it's one of those things that is not necessarily something that people, kind of think of as top of mind. But when you give an example like that around how you can actually be able to take the incoming, right, and then be able to kind of filter it and then communicate that back, that's so brilliant. That's such a great idea.
She's a brilliant woman. She is. She's so smart. She's
That's
awesome.
Awesome. Thank you, Linda.
I know. Thank the Linda.
But it's such a great, I think everyone out there could find some way to be able to incorporate something like that when it comes to those who do have a stake in terms of our flow, right? And
Yes.
How then can we be able to then compartmentalize and then communicate back so that ultimately we can kind of find that clarity on, what is expected and how we prioritize. Because that, I think, for some people out there, I know myself included, I would just kind of make it up.
Yep.
Make it up as I go, and then hope, just get it all done and push it all out, and ultimately then burn the cork up out of myself, right? And so it's really, I think, such a great way to be able to just get clear and get it out, and then be able to kind of share that with that other individual, so then you're on the same page. What a power move. Power pausing for the power move.
And I'd be remiss not to share that when we talked about boundaries, I don't even remember what episode it was. And now I'm starting to wonder if it was the episode I missed. But boundary,
Yeah.
Charm power. The one thing I learned about boundaries that blew my mind, you don't make a boundary in a silo. Because I'm sure a lot of our listeners are like, oh, I just need to have healthier boundaries. How do I do that? If you want to know how to create a healthy boundary with your boss who is informing your flow, you don't tell, you have a conversation and you say, here's what I'm experiencing and I need your help. And it's made between two people. It's not shutting somebody out. It's not shutting down and saying, just slamming the gauntlet down and saying, no more, I can't do it. It's a conversation between two people. That's what so many people get wrong between boundaries. They confuse boundaries with stonewalling and walls, quite literally. And a boundary is something that's created between two people, which I obviously was getting boundaries wrong until I heard that tidbit. And I was like, oh, well, no wonder when I try and set boundaries with my family or my coworkers or anybody in my life, it's an epic fail because I have made them wrong in the process of saying, this is how it needs to be. Oh, you're shutting them out. You're taking away their control. You're taking away their autonomy. It has to be done together. So that's another thought for our listeners to consider. Like, rethink your definition of boundaries too, and what needs to happen. I don't know, Jen, what do you think as I say that?
No, I think boundaries are so tricky, right? Because absolutely, I agree with you that ultimately the greatest way to be able to set and establish clear boundaries is reciprocated, right? Like it is communicated, and then there is some understanding between those involved, and it's not always going to be possible, depending on the circumstances. So I think, for individuals, case by case, it's a matter of really recognizing, okay, what do I need and how can I communicate this effectively? And that's something I think people just, it's tough. It's a tough thing, especially for us people pleasers out there, and for those who really, want to do everything we can to make others happy. Drawing that line, communicating that, and then finding some way, like some offering, or whatever that looks like, to be able to cooperate, together with others. So yeah, I think it's a massive thing. And just for our listeners, boundaries was on episode 4.
Look at you!
Almost 20 episodes ago. Can you believe that?
I mean, that was like midwinter.
Yeah, it was.
And here you are in 110-degree weather. I mean, that's mind-blowing.
Literally sweating.
Yeah. I wish it were a little chilling, but it's not, is it? You're just going to keep sweating over there.
Totally.
Well, let's spice it up with that our last question. What do you personally wish would never end?
My soul's journey. I mean, I am so passionate about continually wanting to get to know myself and exploring, who I am. And it's like this never ending, beautiful thing. And so I think one of the greatest gifts that I've ever given myself is just this need to continually want to continue to get to know what's possible within myself and within my life. And that's, yeah, it's been a pretty powerful thing, but I hope that I never stop. I hope throughout my life I continue to want to expand and explore and be curious. And that's something that I know I've, just like anyone else, you go through phases where you're like, I can't look at another book. And then
Yes.
you go back and you're like, give me all the books. Give me all of them. And that's something that I just am passionate about, and so love about, this field of being in HR, where it is never ending. And what a beautiful thing. Like you started at the beginning of this episode talking about that spectrum, right? It's never going to be on one side or the other all the time. It's really about kind of seeing how, we can kind of meet ourselves where we're at, and then continue to challenge ourselves when we know that there's more, and we know that we can continue to push ourselves in these areas, and especially when it comes to where we're uncomfortable. That is such a big thing for me. It's like, okay, if it's creating discomfort in me, then I'm going to have to figure this one out because clearly I've got something more to learn.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, it's not a perfect recipe in any way, but it does give me a whole lot of purpose. And I think that's a good thing to kind of have be driving the ship,
Yes. That was such a deep answer that I started tearing up when you started explaining it.
Oh.
And
yeah, I wasn't gonna go there, and I'm like, but it just is, it just is.
I mean, just getting to the whole purpose of life, right? And the human experience that we get to have. That got me. I bet that got many of our listeners too.
Well, how about you? What do you hope never ends?
It's similar, not as deep. I hope my mind never stops being blown.
Ooh,
I love, it's like that aliveness. It's exactly what you're expressing, maybe just a slightly different emotion. I went out, I love summer. And I went on a hike last night. I was listening to the podcast 10% Happier, and RuPaul was being interviewed for the podcast. It was freaking amazing. And he said something, he, she, they, I'm not even sure what RuPaul's pronouns are. RuPaul said that God, and he used God, and I'm just going to use he because I'm not sure. He believes that we are all, I'm not going to be able to do it justice. We are all we are all one being. And once we realize that and we're all connected in this humanity, and God is just emanating out, or the universe is emanating out from each of us, that is where we can see, we can lessen the judgment, we can tap into more curiosity. And I had never thought about humanity similar to an aspen grove. Aspens are all connected under the earth. It's one organism. And when I heard RuPaul go that deep about our human connection, it blew my mind. I was like, whoa, that's pretty mind blowing. And then today, I saw this quote on Facebook, this guy, and I actually posted it because I'm still thinking about it. Uncommon expectations are premeditated resentments. And that continues to blow my mind. I brought it up so many times in private coaching today, my group coaching today, and it just really hits me for some reason. One of the women in my group coaching was like, yeah, this just doesn't resonate with me. It feels really negative. And I was like, for me, it just like hits home, and it helps me understand when I am not commuting expectations to people in my life, it is a way, an unconscious premeditated resentment. Mm-hmm. It just really hit me. And I was like, well, there's a reason to start communicating. So again, my mind was just blown by this 20-second clip on Facebook today. And I hope that never stops. It is just the coolest feeling. And then when my clients have their minds, they blow their own minds. I just coach. It's their thoughts that blow their own minds. It's one of the coolest things to witness in this lifetime. So that's what I got.
You were going deep.
Well, you kind of inspired me. I was like, yeah.
I've heard, I hadn't heard RuPaul explain it quite that way around, all being one and that sort of thing. But I have heard someone else, and I can't remember who explained it similar. And I had a similar thing, chills over my entire body. I was like, oh my God. It's pretty amazing to think of things like that and really be able to expand our consciousness to recognize, the aspens can be connected underneath. Guess how we're connected, y'all? We are very much connected. And so, having kind of that better awareness is like, so then who am I fighting? Myself, right? Who am I resenting? Myself. And it's really powerful to be able to recognize how much, we are all the same, but ultimately it's so easy to kind of track on the differences versus the similarities.
Yes.
That was amazing. That was so well said. And articulated incredibly well. So thank you for that.
Are you kidding me? You just wrapped it up perfectly. Like sprinkles on the icing that's on the cake. Loved it. Beautiful sprinkles. Jen, thank you. Every time we do an episode, I learn something new, and you literally blow my mind every single episode. So thank you. It's such an honor to spend time with you again today.
Truly appreciate you so much and the opportunity to have these conversations, because not only do we both feel, the two of us feel like we're kind of expanding ourselves and blowing our own minds every week, we know through the comments and feedback that we're getting, it's spreading. And that's exciting, to know that these types of conversations matter and that they really kind of hit on the nerves that we need them to hit on. So I think, we're making a difference, and one podcast at a time.
That's right. One podcast at a time. I love it. Well, thanks, Jen. And obviously it goes without saying that every day truly is an opportunity to thrive and shine in HR and in life. Had to throw that addendum on there today. So, Jen, I can't wait to see you for episode 24, and all of our listeners out there. Please remember to rate, like, subscribe. I can't even remember. Just share this podcast if it is impacting you in a powerful way, because what is life if we're not paying it forward? So thanks, everybody. And we'll see you next week. Jen, thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.